Ever get hooked on a story and just can't shake it? One of those mysteries where the more you dig, the more questions pop up.
Oh, absolutely. I think we all have those cases that just stay with us.
Well, that's what we're doing today, taking a deep dive into one of those stories. It's the disappearance of Cheryl Levitt, her daughter Susie Streeter, and Susie's friend Stacy McCall. All vanished from Springfield, Missouri back in 1992. It's a case that's baffled folks for over 3 decades.
And we're going to try to untangle it for you.
Right. We've got a lot of ground to cover, from who these women were to the night they disappeared, the investigation, all the theories, even some pretty recent developments.
Really interesting stuff from just this year even,
Yeah.
2025. So we're aiming to cut through the noise and give you the core of what makes this case so compelling.
Exactly. So let's start with who we're talking about, Cheryl Levitt. Born in November 1944, she was a single mom, worked hard as a hairdresser, very involved in her community. Everyone describes her as just a really good person, kind, dedicated, raising her daughter Susie alone, but, a stable home, strong bond between them.
That really comes across. And Susie, born in March 73, she was just starting her adult life, fresh out of Kickapoo High School, full of energy.
Yeah.
People said she was just vibrant, had all these plans for college, even thought about becoming a hairdresser like her mom.
Really on the verge of a whole new chapter, huh?
It seems like it, yeah.
And then there's Stacy McCall, born April 74, close friends with Susie, also just graduated.
Right, and totally different personality by the sounds of it. Bubbly, outgoing, the life of the party kind of gal. Super close to her family, too.
So you've got these 3 women, each with their own thing going on. And they all end up at Susie's house on this particular weekend in June of 92.
Which makes what happened next even more bizarre, because it started as such a normal weekend, Graduation parties, celebrations. Susie and Stacy were going to different ones on that Saturday night. Initially, they planned to crash at a friend's place, but then something changed.
Right. They decided to head back to Susie's house to be with Cheryl. And that, as far as anyone can tell, is the last decision we know they made.
Last confirmed sighting.
Spooky, right. Because after that, things just stop.
It's like a hard cut in the film.
Okay, so walk us through the night itself. Saturday, June 6, 1992. Big night for grads in Springfield.
Yeah, everyone's out celebrating. Susie and Stacy are at these parties having fun. And we know they left one of the parties around 2:15 in the morning. Sunday, June 7th, that is.
Early morning.
Yeah, and they headed straight to Susie's house, 1717 East Delmar Street,
Okay. And Cheryl, where's she in all this?
at home. We know she talked to a friend on the phone that Saturday night, a little after 11. Said everything was fine, normal.
So assumption is, girls get home, everyone's tired, they go to bed, got that water park trip with friends planned for later that Sunday.
Exactly. Sounds like a pretty standard weekend, right? Until it isn't.
Because Sunday morning rolls around, 8 a.m. or so, and their friends show up to go to the water park. And nobody's there.
Nobody. And the scene they find is, well, it's strange.
Strange how.
Front door's unlocked, the TV's on inside. But the women are gone. All 3 of them.
Yeah.
Their purses are there, neatly lined up on the living room floor, like someone carefully placed them there. And their cars. Both cars are right outside. Nothing seems disturbed, no sign of a struggle, no forced entry. It's like they just stepped out for a minute. But
It's been hours. Yeah, that's the kind of detail that makes your stomach drop, isn't it? Everything looks normal, but it's so not.
precisely. And what makes it even more perplexing is that there's no evidence of a fight. No furniture knocked over, no signs of forced entry, nothing to suggest a struggle. And that's a really key piece of this puzzle. It suggests that whatever happened, it didn't start with someone barging in or a fight breaking out.
So either they knew whoever came to the door or they were tricked somehow.
That's what makes it so unsettling.
But there was one thing that was off, right? The porch light.
Ah, yeah. That broken porch light. Weird, right? The glass globe was broken, but someone had swept up all the pieces and put them in the trash. Not just left them there like you might if you were in a hurry or something. It was deliberate. Almost tidy.
Like someone trying to clean up after themselves, but why just the porch light?
Exactly. It adds another layer of mystery to an already bizarre situation. Now, you also have to remember the friends who found the house. They were obviously freaking out. They tried calling the women. And at one point, one of them actually answered. But it wasn't one of the 3. It was someone else.
A wrong number.
Not exactly. It was a prank call. And the content of the call, pretty disturbing. Sexual overtones, kind of creepy. And apparently there's another similar call later on, too. It's unclear if these calls were directly related to the disappearances, but they definitely added to the fear and confusion.
Right. Like, was it a coincidence? Or were they meant to throw people off? So the friends called the police, which is the right thing to do. And then what?
Well, then the investigation begins, but almost immediately they hit a wall. There's basically no physical evidence.
Like, none at all.
Not really. No fingerprints that don't belong to the women or their friends, no unaccounted for DNA, no signs of a struggle, nothing. It's this eerie normalcy, as if they just vanished.
Into thin air.
Yeah, like they were just erased.
Yeah.
That's part of what's made this case so difficult.
So what did they do, the investigators, I mean?
They went all out. Local police, the FBI, tons of volunteers. It started as a missing persons case, but pretty quickly they started to suspect foul play.
Because of the lack of contact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, no phone calls, no messages, nothing. That's not typical for missing persons, especially not for 3 people at once. So they did everything. Canvassing the neighborhood, interviewing anyone who knew the women, following up on every tip, every lead.
Any of those leads pan out?
Sadly, no. Early on, they looked into a transient who was in the area, thought maybe he was involved, cleared him pretty quickly. Then there was this persistent story about a green van seen near the house. Witnesses said they saw it around the time the women disappeared.
Creepy van alert, huh?
Pretty much. But despite putting out calls for information, they never got any solid details.
Dead end.
Another one. And of course, they dug into the women's lives, looking for anything that might point to a motive or a suspect. Cheryl had recently broken up with someone, but they investigated that and didn't find any connection. Susie had this small legal issue going on, something to do with her dad's estate, but again, nothing there.
Frustrating, huh?
Must have been incredibly frustrating for everyone involved. Imagine chasing down every lead, every possibility, only to hit a brick wall every time. And then 5 years after the disappearance, this guy named Robert Craig Cox enters the picture.
Cox. That's a name that comes up a lot with this case.
It does. He was already in prison for other crimes.
Yeah.
But in 1997, he claims to know what happened to the women. Says they're dead, buried in Webster County.
Okay, so they search, right.
Big search, the whole area. And they find nothing. No bodies, no evidence to back up his claims, nothing. And so, while he remains a person of interest for some folks, there's no hard proof linking him to the case.
So was he lying, or did he know something but led them on a wild goose chase?
It's a question that's been debated for years. Maybe he was seeking attention, maybe he wanted to cut a deal, who knows. But the fact remains, his story didn't lead anywhere concrete.
And then years later, in 2002, there was another big development. They excavated a parking lot at Cops Hospital in Springfield.
Remember that. Based on some anomalies they found with ground-penetrating radar. Big operation. Everyone was hopeful, thinking maybe this was it, maybe they'd finally get some answers. Nothing. Another dead end. Just another painful reminder of how elusive the truth has been in this case. But despite all this, it's important to note that the Springfield PD has never officially closed the case. They still follow up on tips, still look into new information.
That's got to give the family some hope, right? Knowing that someone's still working on it.
I would think so, yeah. And over the years, so many theories have emerged, trying to explain what happened that night. One of the most common ones is abduction by a stranger.
Makes sense given the lack of forced entry. Like maybe they knew the person or were tricked into letting them in.
Yeah, but the logistics of that are tough to figure out. How do you take 3 adult women without any sign of a struggle? It would have to be pretty well planned, pretty sophisticated.
Right. What about connections to other cases? Does this one have any links to other missing persons?
People have looked into that, especially the case of Angela Hammond, who disappeared in 1991 from Clinton, Missouri.
Why that one specifically?
Some similarities in the circumstances, but investigators haven't found any direct link.
Just a possible coincidence then.
Could be, yeah. Then, of course, there's Cox, like we talked about. His story, even though it hasn't been proven, has kept him in the conversation all these years.
What about the idea that someone they knew was involved, family or a friend?
They looked into that, obviously. It's always a possibility in cases like this. But no evidence ever pointed in that direction.
So no clear motive, no suspects within their circle?
Right. And some people have even floated the idea of an accidental death and a cover-up.
Really? But how would that even work?
It's a tough one to square with the evidence, or lack thereof. Why leave the purses, the cars? It doesn't really add up.
So we've got all these theories, but without concrete proof, they're just theories.
Exactly. That's the frustrating part. And yet, even after all this time, there have been some recent developments. We're talking 2025 now, and new information has come to light.
Oh, really? Like,
Earlier this year, someone came forward. A witness who was a teenager back in '92 claims to have seen a green van near the house that night. And even more than that, they say they saw 3 people being forced into the van.
Wow, that's huge, if it's true.
Absolutely. It could be a major break in the case. They're actively investigating it now. And, it brings up that whole green van thing again, which is interesting.
Right, like maybe there's something to those earlier reports after all.
It's possible. And on top of that, forensic technology has come a long way. They're re-examining evidence from the house, like that broken porch light globe, using new DNA testing methods.
Hoping to find something they missed back then.
Exactly. Sometimes the tiniest trace of DNA can be the key.
It's amazing what science can do these days.
It is. And, the whole true crime boom has actually been helpful in cases like this. There's a popular podcast that recently covered the Springfield Three. And that kind of attention can sometimes lead to new tips, new witnesses coming forward.
People who maybe didn't think their information was important before?
Exactly. Or maybe they were afraid to come forward back then. But it's important to be cautious, too. The families have been through so much over the years, so many ups and downs. False hope can be really hard to deal with.
Right. And even with these new developments, there's no guarantee they'll lead to answers, but at least the case is still active, still being investigated.
That in itself is something. And it speaks to the impact this case has had, not just on the families, but on the whole community.
Because this wasn't just a story, right? It was real people's lives.
Absolutely. Imagine the pain of not knowing what happened to your daughter, your mother, your friend. The not knowing is what eats at you. Stacy's mom, Janice McCall, she's been so outspoken about the case. She once said, and this is a quote, "Not knowing is the worst part. If I knew what happened, even if it was bad news, I could start to heal."
Powerful words.
They are. And it wasn't just the families. The whole community of Springfield was shaken. It made people realize that this kind of thing can happen anywhere, to anyone.
Shattered that sense of safety.
Yeah. And on a larger scale, the case also had an impact on how missing persons cases are handled. It showed how important it is for different agencies to work together seamlessly, to share information, not operate in silos.
So in a way, some good came out of this tragedy, at least in terms of how investigations are done.
You could say that. And the case continues to fascinate people. Even now, all the documentaries, the podcasts, the articles, they all keep the story alive. And maybe, just maybe, they'll help lead to some answers.
So here we are all these years later, and the biggest question remains. What happened to Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy? Despite all the efforts, all the theories, we still don't have a definitive answer.
It's a mystery that continues to haunt us. And since it is still an open case, we want to take a moment to address our listeners directly. If you have any information, anything at all that you think might be relevant, please contact the Springfield Police Department. You never know. What you might remember could be the missing piece of the puzzle.
It's never too late to come forward, and sometimes the smallest detail can make all the difference.
This case is a powerful reminder that these aren't just stories. These are real people, real lives that were tragically cut short. And we owe it to them, to their families, to keep searching for the truth.
To never give up hope.
Exactly.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive.
But this case, it's one that stays with you, right? Makes you think.
It really does. If you're interested in learning more about this case, we've included links to some resources in our show notes. And as always, we encourage you to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.